How's it going, everyone? It's Riley's Redzone, and welcome to the Week 12 edition of Weekly NFL Picks. We are just cruising through the season, and we're looking forward to another, what should be great week of football. So before we dive into the picks for this week, if you're new to the channel, every week we select who we think wins the game. We don't do spreads, but we do straight up picks. Every week since week 2, I've had a guest picker on. That will continue as always today. And so last week, I went 9-5, 2 weeks in a row. So doing okay, that's about 60% now on the season. I'm at least staying above that 500 mark. Alex, our guest picker, went 10-4. So a decent week for him, which puts him up towards the top of the standings. And this week, trying to add to that will be Raza, who has his selections for the week, trying to get to the top of that leaderboard, which Danny is just miles ahead. We'll see if he could get there. But this week's going to be very fun. Already looking at the picks, we have a lot of upsets to go around, so this should be a very interesting week, no doubt about it. So let's just dive in tonight. The first game of the week, we have Browns and Steelers. This could be interesting. The Steelers coming off a huge victory against Baltimore, which both myself and Alex predicted, but it felt exactly where the Ravens, I thought going in, would be the better team, but it's the type of game the Steelers would win, and with it being that close, that's kind of what we saw. And because of that, I'm going to have it as a theme throughout this episode, but I think getting a big victory can actually be emotionally draining to a team heading into the next week. And so I'm all gonna go here with an upset selection, which is kind of shocking as the Browns did not play well whatsoever last week against the Saints, but I'm going to go with the Browns in this one as the underdog. Raza's going with the favorite Steelers. That's already a kind of bold take on my part, but overall I think the Browns with James here could be interesting. I've been this week doing a lot more research on the series history between some division opponents as what's been going on as of late, and this one's pretty split, but I think being at home is a difference maker. I'll take Cleveland as the underdog to start off this video. Titans and Texans. The Titans are just not great. I mean, they at least fought with the Vikings at times, but they're clearly not towards the top of the ladder. And the Texans play a Cowboys team who is a shell of themselves with all the injury, but I believe that the Texans are a legit pretty solid team. They took a couple stumbles, but overall they're back, and so I have them near the top 10 in the rankings. I'm taking the Texans, so does Raza. That's just a safe pick there between the two AFC South teams. Then the Vikings and the Bears that we mentioned. The Vikings at this point aren't looking as dominant as they did early in the season, but they're getting victories bottom line, and their defense is playing well enough to always keep them in the game most of the time. They've slipped a little bit in the rankings where I don't know if this is your legit Super Bowl window, but they at least have a lot of potential. This is a tricky game going against the Bears. The Vikings have won 5 of the last 6 against Chicago, although the last game in the series was a win by Chicago. And the Bears coming off of a very tight loss against the Packers, they will have a lot of motivation. I kind of wanted to take the Bears at home, but it's just enough of a range in the rankings where the Vikings to me are a better team. So I'm going with Minnesota on the road. Roz is going with Chicago as the underdog. I think that's a pretty solid selection actually, because at home could be a difference maker there, but I'll take the favorite in Minnesota for that one. Cowboys and Commanders. I think if we talked about this a few weeks ago, this could have been a different situation, but with the quarterback spot for Dallas and overall their team just not performing very well as of late, I am going to go with Washington. I think they're the better team. So does Raza. This is just a pretty safe choice for the week. Despite the loss against the Eagles last week, Washington's still a good team. I believe that they are the favorite for a reason in this matchup, and that's the direction we're both going there as a simple one. But this next one to me is very interesting to see where this ended up, as we have Dolphins and Patriots. The Dolphins have won 7 of the last games, of the last 8 against the Patriots, which is pretty interesting for sure. But especially in Miami, the Dolphins have kind of, even when Tom Brady was there and the Patriots were a dominant team, Miami at home was able to get some victories, but I'm feeling a little different about Drake May this week, maybe giving a spark, and so does Raza. We're both going with the underdog Patriots as a big pick this week. I like it a lot. I think that Drake May and the offense will actually have a spark. They kept it close with the Rams last week, and so overall, This is a game in which the Patriots, maybe historically over the last little while, the Dolphins have had the advantage, but I like Drake May and what this offense could provide. So we're both going with the dog there in the Patriots. Chiefs, Panthers. The Chiefs finally lose, and at least it was one of the weeks where I did pick against the Chiefs, and it worked out. But as I've talked about every single week, basically, it doesn't really matter. At some point, we knew they were going to lose a game, but they're still going to be favorites when it comes to the playoffs. The Panthers here are a scrappy team that could make it very, very interesting, but I think just to be safe here, the Chiefs already coming off a loss. I think they're going to have some motivation. I'll take Kansas City, so does Raza. Boy, what a heck of a win it would be for Carolina if they could get something to go there. But for now, I'll take the Chiefs as the safe option. Bucs, Giants. This game's worthy of discussion to me because the Giants have been all over the news this week with Daniel Jones. He's quarterback 4. You're paying him $40 million, and he's your 4th quarterback now, apparently. That is definitely ridiculous that you wouldn't want to see it go that way for the Giants, but that's just the way it has. And they're going with Tommy DeVito, not Drew Lock. That was another storyline throughout the week. The Bucs coming off a bye. Baker always keeps it interesting. It looks like maybe Mike Evans might be coming back soon, perhaps. But either way, I think that the Bucs, despite some of their injury problems, have shown to have some firepower. I do believe that Daniel Jones was not playing very well and that having Tommy DeVito may provide a spark to this Giants team. I just don't think it's quite enough. I think the Bucs are a solid enough team. I've got them in a couple tiers ahead of the Giants. That I'm taking Tampa Bay. So does Raza. I do think with Tommy DeVito, this game comes down to maybe a 22-16 type of matchup that's within one possession, but I will take the Bucs in that probably close one of a semi-battle of mid there of those two teams. But the Lions, I have skyrocketed up to the number 1 spot right now in the power rankings with the Chiefs losing last week. And they face off against the Colts, who actually did look all right with Anthony Richardson against the Jets, albeit we've seen what the Jets are this season. That's a roller coaster in itself. But the Lions are a great football team. This could be the perfect game for the Colts to come in and spoil, but I think that Detroit has the advantage here. They're just a wagon of a football team, and the Lions, to me, have the advantage. The Colts, with Anthony Richardson, I think it's smart they go back. At this point, he has more momentum going on his side, but I'll take the Lions, and so does Raza there. And this is a pick I didn't expect myself coming into the week to make, but looking at some history, it's very interesting that the Broncos and the Raiders are against each other in the AFC West. The Raiders have won 8 of the last 9 against the Broncos, although that one was earlier this year. So it's different, but I believe that the Raiders have historically shown some dominance against Denver. Denver showed some dominance against Atlanta last week. What a showing that was. To me, that jumped up the Broncos a whole tier for me, that they are legit, not just playoff, but they're strong playoff contenders. They could easily get a victory in the wild card if they get there. And they are looking really, really solid. To me, it was not only did they get a victory, but they got a cruising victory over at least a pretty good Atlanta team there. So you feel good about that. The Raiders lose to the Dolphins, but I'm feeling a little bit of spark from Antonio Pierce and the guys in the Raiders uniform. So I'm going to take the Raiders as underdogs, a little bit of a bold choice there, but Raza goes with the Broncos. The Broncos have looked great with Bo Nix. They're going to be legit, but I'm just feeling a little bit of a division upset here, perhaps to just make sure that seat is not hot whatsoever for Antonio Pierce and the Raiders. Cardinals, Seahawks. This is an interesting game to me because these two teams are just in that NFC West, but competitive, almost wild card range. And, you know, they're looking at potentially with the Niners slipping as trying to win the division. The Cardinals, I've maybe been a little bit too early on that over the past few years. I thought they'd take that step up. This year seems like the year. They're getting it to go on both sides of the football, and that's what's key. But the Seahawks get a nice victory over the 49ers last week, and I've talked about it a lot. I just don't think the ceiling is there for the Seahawks, but the floor is absolutely there. So at home, with the Seahawks winning the last 5 in the series. I'll take Seattle against Arizona. So does Raza. But that game should be probably close, and especially with the way the Cardinals have been playing, it could be very tight come Sunday. And speaking of those 49ers, the 49ers and the Packers, this game, to me, is going to be a very fun one to watch because in the playoffs, the Niners have easily had the advantage over the last few times, but in the regular season, the Packers have had it. I talked about earlier emotional wins. To me, the Packers last week barely holding on against the Bears. I think that last year in the playoffs showed the Niners did have Jordan Love's number a little bit. I think they'll get him rattled this week. And as the underdog, give me the 49ers. So does Raza take that selection. That's an interesting one to watch as we're both taking the underdog pick there. I think the Packers are a good team. I just don't believe Jordan Love has been that and potential MVP candidate maybe people thought would be going into this season. He's looked good. They're going to be a playoff team and probably make it interesting to get some victories early in the playoffs. But I like San Francisco here as the underdog. Eagles-Rams, to me, that win against the Commanders last week proved that the Eagles can be pretty legit. I have them in the top 5 at this point in the rankings, and they're finally looking like what I thought preseason they could, which should be one of the favorites in the NFC right behind the Lions, and they're finally starting to show that. Saquon's been a big boost for them, but they're going against a scrappy Rams team who, with Sean McVay and Matthew Stafford on the regular availability, is going to keep it competitive in any ball game they're in. They get the win over the Patriots last week, but they're going to keep it close, and that's what Raza thinks. He's going to go with the underdog, Los Angeles Rams. I'm sticking with the Eagles as the favorite, but that right there is a fun one because the Rams always make games close. When you have that combo of coach and quarterback, it doesn't matter if their roster may be a little bit less than some other teams. They're going to keep it close. And then the Ravens and the Chargers. This is get your popcorn ready. The Harbaugh Bowl on a Monday night. This is going to be beautiful to see. The Ravens and the Chargers should be a really great matchup. The Ravens coming off of the tight loss against the Steelers, to me, will have a little bit of motivation. Meanwhile, the Chargers, they also had a close game, but they were on the winning side against the Bengals. They're letting Herbert loose, and this is where you got to watch out because record-wise, the Chargers have done really well. I don't think they've had a lot of tests, in my opinion, of playing great teams, but the truth is they're getting the job done, both in the air, through the ground. They can play solid defense. They have so much potential with Jim Harbaugh at the helm there, and he's, to me, really shaped things up. But this week, coming off of the loss is what the game changer is for me. I like Baltimore to bounce back. Raza's going to go with the Chargers. I really like that underdog selection. Jim Harbaugh has them going, no doubt about it. So that's the weekly picks section of the video. We're going to do a quick recap of the Fantasy League, what's been going on there. Charlie just continues to wheel and deal. He has 180 points scored last week, which according even to Sleeper is 104% of the perfect lineup possible. I don't know how that's possible. So you also want best manager, or most efficient manager should be the term. I think that the app uses on the phone and not the laptop that I'm looking at. That's the better one there. Least efficient was Alex, who scored 112 out of 158. The biggest margin of victory was Zach over Max by 60 points or so, 177 to 113. And then the narrow victory was between Cody and Danny. I didn't even realize that Danny lost within 1 point 2 weeks in a row. Last week I took him down by 0.6, and this week he loses by about, what is that, 0.6 as well. That is incredible. So as we look at the matchups for this week based on the standings, it's myself versus Cody, so kind of some mid matchup there on the Virginia side. Then we have Matthew versus Carson and Braden versus Zach. So our whole division is kind of right there hovering around the 500 mark, which is very interesting. And then on the other side, we have the Charlie versus Andrew. There might be some buys going on because Charlie is not favored in the matchup. He's 10-1, has been absolutely ridiculous. Yet Andrew is favored at 4-7. That could be an upset alert. Max against Alex, and we have Nick versus Danny. But looking at those standings, as I mentioned, and on the Virginia side, it's a lot of 500 teams going on that we're trying to make a final push. And then on the other side, you have Charlie, who's just been dominating the league as of late. I mean, he's got the most points for by a couple hundred, it appears to me. As the closest is, he has 1646 points scored on the season, and next closest is Max with 1472. My goodness, he just is putting on the points. And on the other side, we have a lot of teams that are struggling, and there will be rewards and punishments at the end of the season for first and last place. So that should be fun to see what ends up going on there. But that will do it for this week's episode of the Weekly Picks. We appreciate you tuning in. Enjoy the rest of your week watching football or whatever you may be doing on this lovely November weekend. And we will see you in next week's edition of the Weekly NFL Picks.